Am I the asshole for putting a sunflower between my deceased grandmother's hands in her casket? Not really sure how to start this, but when I 24F was about 14, I watched my grandma have a heart attack and pass away. I lived with my grandma from a very early age and she was the rock of my family, as a lot of grandmas are. That being said, we were very close, and this was very traumatic for me. Fast forward to her funeral, and my cousin and I were viewing her body before the actual funeral burial, and there was a flower shop in the funeral home. My cousin and I purchased a sunflower because we knew it was her favorite, and when we got back to her casket, we saw an opening between her hands and put it between them as if she were holding it. Our older cousin got extremely upset and said we were making a mockery of her death as if she were a cartoon with the flower between her hands, and my aunt and mother were upset about it too. I still think about how shitty it made me feel sometimes because I genuinely just knew she loved them and wanted her to hold it. Am I the asshole for this? Not the asshole. There are clearly innocent intentions behind this, not sure why they'd try to make you feel badly about it. Not the asshole. I can't say your relatives were either because everyone grieves differently. For reference, when my grandfather died, at his viewing one of my aunts walked up to his casket and booped his nose. I would never do that, but I know my aunt has always used humor to deal with complicated situations, and the death of her father was clearly complicated. My mother on the other hand kept repeating, "I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine," and then would get angry with people for mundane things. She was never able to process her emotions and she didn't know how to grieve. Not the asshole. I don't know how anyone would think you were mocking her death for placing her favorite flower in her casket. That is a beautiful gesture and your mother, aunt, and cousin should be ashamed for giving you crap for it. Nah, it was a very sweet and loving gesture. It doesn't make you an asshole. They might have been a bit harsh in their criticism, but I don't think they're assholes either. Everyone was grieving and grief can put anyone on edge or make them react badly to a sweet gesture. Not the asshole. Different people grieve differently. Not the asshole. It is not abnormal for the deceased to hold flowers. It sounds quite loving, actually. Nah. The death of a family member is a very sensitive time, and people's feelings are very raw. Your intentions were good, but that doesn't seem to have come across. As a general rule, when it comes to funerals etc., it's best not to surprise anybody, so it would have been better to check with your family first if it was okay, and they could have expressed that it would make them feel uncomfortable. But you're not an asshole for wanting to do a nice thing in tribute to your grandma, even if it didn't come across the way you intended. Not the asshole. You remembered they were her favorite flowers while the rest of your family didn't. You have a kind heart and this is in no way a mockery of her death. Nah, just a lot of very high emotions. Their assumptions aren't your motives, but they might not accept that. When my grandmother died, one person put a necklace in the coffin. One put a bright orange teddy bear in a Cowboys jersey. One put a prismatic bookmark, etc. We had people fuming about how she looked like a clown because of all the colors, but the people who placed those things did so because each of them meant something to their memories of her. Nah. It is common practice to place flowers or a single, perfect, bloom between the hands of a loved one being laid to rest. Lilies and roses may be more usual, but you chose her favorite flower. What a beautiful way to honor your grandma. Try to forgive your family for their hurtful comments in the moment. Grief affects everyone differently. At that point in time they couldn't see your gesture for the heartfelt gift it was. Not the asshole. You knew her and you did something following your heart. Not the asshole. Nah. You did that because you know how much she loved sunflowers, which is sweet, but doing that without letting anybody know wasn't cool. Not the asshole. Not the asshole. I am so very sorry about your gran. Having the trauma of watching her die made it even harder. When my gran died, the May flowers were in bloom. They were her favorite flower, so I spent a couple of hours in the woods picking enough to make her pretty bouquet that I wrapped in lace and tied with a ribbon. I placed them in her hands in the casket and everyone commented how pretty they were and how sweet they smelled. Just like my Mayflowers, your sunflower was a beautiful gift to her and a wonderful, personal way for you to say goodbye. Not the asshole. You weren't making a mockery of her death. It was a genuinely kind gesture. You shouldn't feel bad. I'm sure your grandmother would have loved the flower and the gesture. Not the asshole. Your family is absolutely shitty. You loved her and she loved you. What you did was extremely nice. Not the asshole. My dear, departed father would absently twirl the hair at his widow's peak till it formed a small curl. During his viewing, my older sister reached down and twirled his hair into a curl one last time. Grateful for the memory. Cherish your sunflower grandma's memory, she approved. What a beautiful gesture. I am sure your grandmother would have appreciated it immensely. I did a similar thing with Mew grandmother. I handpicked a few of her favorite flowers and put them in her hand after I washed and dressed her after her death. Not the asshole. It was a sweet and honest thing to do. I'm a hospice nurse and I help dress up patients after they die in whatever the family has given us. If the family has left nothing, we use a hospital gown. We always put a rose in their hands. It's partially for the family, but even for those that have no family matter and their life meant something. The rose is our way of saying that their lie and their passing mattered. You're not the asshole, it was thoughtful and personal. Not the asshole. You were doing something to honor the memory of the grandmother you loved, the others were wrong to shame you for that. Not the asshole at all. Not the asshole. I have had 5 family members pass away since 2015. When my family have went to go view their bodies they have had roses between their hands. So definitely not disrespectful. It was a very sweet thing for you to do and I'm sure your grandmother would have loved that you choose her favorite flower. Not the asshole. No assholes here. I think their reaction was a bit much but they were grieving too and sometimes people can be irrational when they're grieving. I think your heart was in the right place and I personally put a flower in my grandma's grave, as did all my cousins. Not the asshole. You and your cousin were just paying tribute to your grandmother with something she loved, and giving her a final, special gift. When my uncle died, his best friend since childhood put a bag full of those plastic green army men into his casket just before the funeral. They played with them together all the time as kids, and it was both incredibly sweet and heartbreaking. Not the asshole. What a freaking thing for them to get upset about. It's a damn flower and she loved them. Not the asshole. I can't say the relatives are either really because they were in grief and probably just handled it differently. But you and your cousin did nothing wrong by placing the flower in her hands. It was a sweet, caring gesture, not a mockery of her death. Not the asshole. I'm so sorry they made you feel like crap. That was a beautiful gesture. Nah. My father was an avid reader who never went anywhere without a book. My brother and I put a book with him, in his casket. As an outsider, I can't see teenagers sending grandma off with her favorite flower as anything but sweet. I bet, looking back on it, your older family members would see it that way, too. But sometimes, when people are grieving, they cling to an overly rigid sense of propriety. So try to give them a pass for their reaction. Not the asshole. When my husband's grandpa died, his cousin's husband was a pallbearer. Cousin deals with grief in a humorous way and said in front of a lot of family, "Don't drop my grandpa or else you're next." We all knew it was a joke and I told my husband, then boyfriend, to be extra careful and if he needed I had makeup powder in the truck to chalk his hands up. It was raining. You gave your grandma a flower to carry with her into the next life. It was special. Not the asshole. You did something very sweet. I really think your family jumped to the wrong conclusion and overreacted. Not the asshole. You did nothing wrong, in fact that practice what the cartoon is based on. Not the asshole. Putting things in the coffin is part of grieving. When my dad died unexpectedly, days before we were going to take him to a Mets game for his birthday, my sister and I put the game tickets in his suit jacket pocket, his favorite Mets shirt draped over his lap, and the Mets pendant he bought me at the only game we went to in 1998 to the top of the casket so he'd enjoy the view. We may have went a little overboard and in retrospect, should have kept the shirt and pendant for ourselves, but it helped at the time. Losing someone you love is hard. Leaving a gift with them to have forever is something kind to do to feel like you're still connected to them. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about it. Not the asshole. When my dad's best friend died, my dad and another friend snuck a bottle of scotch and a carton of cigarettes into the coffin. A flower is lovely. Not the asshole. I think it's a beautiful gesture, I would have done the same. Not the asshole. When my grandpa passed away, Mom and I put a can of Skol in my grandpa's hands in the casket and a bag of lemon drops because both were things he loved. Relatives thought my young cousins did it. Everyone was surprised to find out it was us. Thought it was great, honestly. This said, what you did was sweet and touching and some people just won't get that, which to me is sad. This was just sweet to you too. Not the asshole. Nah. You did it out of love. They were upset because they failed to see that and thought it disrespectful. You're probably more in the right than they are, but they weren't being spiteful. Not the asshole. Nah, I think it was a great idea. Not the asshole. I'm not sure where you live, but putting things a deceased person liked into the coffin with them is really common in lots of parts of the world. Your gran liked flowers and you gave her some. I think it's a very kind gesture. Nah, though in this case your relatives are only barely not aw. I think you obviously weren't making a joke. Nah. They wouldn't do what you did only because they grieve differently than you. They shouldn't have gotten upset with you for it, but I understand their side. When my uncle passed, we placed letters and trinkets in his arms during the viewing. My mom and I put one little nug of wheat each behind his ear when nobody was looking because he was a mega stoner, and my fondest memories of him always included a joint hanging from his lips. It felt like the right way to honor him, something I know he'd have laughed about and enjoyed. I bet your grandma would have loved what you did for her. Not the asshole. Your grandma would have understood and loved it. Wouldn't she? Not the asshole. I don't know what was your cousin thinking when it comes to putting a flower. Not the asshole. I personally put something meaningful in each of my grandparents' caskets. It was my way of sending them off with something that had personal meaning between us. Also, grief tends to oftentimes bring out the worst in some people. Hopefully your cousin will see the error in their way and apologize to you at some point. I'm very sorry for your loss. My beloved mother-in-law died last October. My sister-in-law asked the florist for the most profuse, colorful, and varied arrangement they could come up with. It was glorious, and had a sunflower at its center. I love what you and your cousin did, and she would have too. Not the asshole. Plus it was her favorite flower. What you did is a beautiful gesture. Not the asshole. No explanation needed.